Hi. Okay, here is the re-recording of session number 3 regarding split testing. How we do that, why we do that, why it's imperative, and how to. I'll show you how I split test and the process. So essentially what split testing is, it's also called the A/B testing in marketing language. And why it's imperative, it's essentially to test different ad variations and then find out what works better. So we're testing and learning, and the only way to improve ads, find out what's actually working, is to test different variations. So yeah, I mean, if you just run one ad all the time, you're not gonna know if it's successful or if it could be more successful. So it's just a constant process of testing variations of what we think is working, essentially. How to do that? So how I do that, like I mentioned in the call that we just had earlier today, is I set this up manually so that we can kind of force feed the same amount of budget to each ad so that we make the decision when to turn them off and how to analyze the data instead of Facebook doing that for us. I just do it that way because it means that we're able to learn more, even for us to know what is or isn't working, because we're not having Facebook make the decisions, we are making the decisions ourselves. So here I've written up some notes here that hopefully is helpful around how I do the split testing. Say that you have a campaign. I usually tend to split test around 3 variations. I think it's easy to stick to 3. You can also do 2, maybe not 2 more than 3, because at your ad spend budget, it's not really enough for all ads to get enough budget, and also it just confuses. It makes things more confusing the more ads you have in circulation. So the kind of idea and how I set this up is, if we do it from scratch, say that you'd never ran ads for Lux Inc. before, I would then start with 3 vastly different ad variations. And here I've written that you believe in, quote unquote, believe in. So that means we're not testing 3 vastly different ads unless we think there's promise in running those ads. Does that make sense? Because when I first started split testing, I didn't really understand that concept. I thought, well, I don't think that version B will work, but I should test it because it's vastly different. No, that's not how I go about things. I think of a concept. For example, okay, I want to split test an image of Browse, an image of Aurelian, and a video of Browse. And I believe all of these images are good, or all of these creatives are good and might do well. And I just want to then let the data decide which one does the best, essentially. So I don't split test things I don't believe in myself. And then you always kind of have an idea of what you think might work better. But yeah, that's also why you test and learn, to let the data decide and not your own kind of thought process. So I try to start with trying to test 3 vastly different variations that I believe in, that I think will work or are good for my account and my brand, my business. Analyze the results once you've gotten that data, so after a few days or a week, depending on your budget. Learn, and from there I continue to narrow down what seems to be working. So over time you start learning, okay, this type of creative seems to do better than the first one, or X works better than Z. So over time you kind of start understanding. So I do it in, I guess the first initial would be 3 rounds, and then there's just a large amount of other kind of tests that you can do as well. It's there's too many to write down, and you can come up with your own as well. You can Google them as well, but these are kind of some common ones. So how I typically tend to do it is I first split test the copy. And by copy, I mean this here, this section here. That's called the copy, this is called the creative, and this here is called the headline. Just expand that so it's a bit bigger. Nope, won't let me expand now. Yeah, that's the headline, and then this is called the CTA, or the call to action, which can also be split tested. Shouldn't add that here. Different. Learn more or book now. So I tend to first split test the copy. So I just choose one image that I believe is good, the best that I, in my head, okay, I think this one will work well. And then I test 3 different copy variations, and I have 3 different angles that I also think should work well. So and I try to make them sort of vastly different. So maybe one is, for example, 3 different angles might be one that's calling out more or appealing more to people of a certain age. We had the thinning copy angle, or your brows thinning with age. This one is more about trust. Have you heard about cosmetic brow tattoo? You haven't found someone you can trust. So that's kind of a different type of angle. And a third angle might be a certain profession, or have you, for example, another copy angle we tested was, have you had a brow tattoo and you're not happy with it? So see how those are kind of vastly different angles and drawing different audiences. That's an example of 3 copy angles. And then I run those 3 copy angles with the same image and the same call to action and the same headline. And then I look at the data and I see, after a few days, etc., I see which one seems to be getting a better click-through rate. So again, let me just kind of use an example. We'll go with this one here that you had previously ran. So once I've ran these 3 ads until I have enough data to kind of see how it's going, I will then look at all of these different metrics, which is I sent through to you in a separate email. So does the CPM look okay? Is there one that's 10 and one that's 30? Because that means you're paying a lot more for the traffic for the $30 ad. So does anything stand out, or are they quite similar? Are they in line with the metrics that I sent through to you in my previous email? I look at the cost per click. I especially look at the click-through rate, because that indicates, first of all, how relevant this ad is to our audience, how many people are interested on clicking through. If it has a low click-through rate, aka under 1%, it just indicates that your audience is not so interested in this ad. They're not clicking through, they're just ignoring it. And then I, of course, check the other metrics, specifically the checkout initiated, to see how many people are clicking through on the ad, and then also actually initiating a checkout. So they're clicking book now. So they're curious to find out about the booking process, or they're curious to find out about the price. They're just a little bit more engaged, a little bit warmer if more people check out, initiate checkout. Of course, I check the lead as well, which is kind of even further down the funnel. If people are booking a consultation in person or phone, that of course means that they're warmer. It's technically probably a better ad. And then the very end result we're looking for, of course, is purchases if you're looking for bookings. But even here we can see the reason to split test, and the benefit is that if you had only ran this ad, and say this is not like 100% accurate split test, because we have 2 different copy angles and we have 2 different creatives, so we can't say exactly what the winning factor here is, which is why we only change one variable at a time, so either the copy or the creative or the headline. But yeah, say that you hadn't done a split test here, you'd only ran this ad, and then you would be paying $200 per lead, whereas with a well put together split test, you've done here suddenly half that cost almost. So you're paying half as much for your leads with this ad, only because we ran these different variations. We're able to find out then that this one generates leads at a much lower cost. So that is the whole purpose, that is the whole idea behind split testing, is learning and finding out what works, and getting better results for your ad account and for your business. So going back to kind of a split test example, I just created a little dummy booking here. Like I said, let's say here, start with copy. Usually if I start from scratch with a new ad account or a new kind of type of campaign, I will do that. But like we spoke about in our previous session today, it just really depends on the situation. For example, for your ad account, we've kind of proven time and time again that image of Aurelian, it does work. It is a proven concept. So in your case, then I suggested, I think instead of starting with split testing copy, maybe it's better to narrow down on the creative. So this is not kind of, bulletproof every single time I'll go about this process. You just kind of have to think, strategically what makes sense and what have I done previously? What do I know? What am I trying to find out? What am I trying to learn? But say here that we're at round B. We already have our copy and now we want to split test creative. So then how I would go about it is, again, try to choose 3 vastly different creatives, but that are still good in your opinion and that are still relevant. So for example, by that I mean, say that our copy angle here was the thinning brow angle, which is appealing to women who maybe, are getting a little bit older and their brows have started thinning. Naturally then, when you split test the creative, it wouldn't really make sense to choose a creative of a young woman in her 20s and split test that with an older woman in her 60s, right? Because so we have to also make sure that the creative makes sense as per what we have for our copy. So then, you want to probably split test 3 different creatives with older women in it. So that's kind of what I mean by choosing relevant creatives. I'm just kind of emphasizing that because this wasn't, I didn't really fully understand that concept when I first started. I just thought, okay, good, you should split test everything, despite maybe knowing that some things won't work for sure. But so that's not really how I do things these days. So here, for example, in this creative test here, I have this one, image Aurelian, and then I'm split testing that, the exact same copy, the exact same headline, with a video, and then also the third one is an image here. So these are all very different creatives, really. So this should kind of give us a good indication of, are we seeing a much higher click-through rate on one of them? Are we seeing a much higher, a lower cost per initiate checkout? And that's kind of how you learn which direction to maybe focus more on. So this is kind of what we've already done previously, right? So for the image Aurelian, a split test you can do then is you can test 3 different images of him. That's kind of what I am trying to explain here, narrowing down on what seems to be working and then try to find even more winning or better concepts. So this could be a creative round 2 test. We have the image of Aurelian, who's a new image, this one here. We have the old one. And then we have a third one, which is, I call the studio one. Also has the offer. You notice all of them have the micro-bidding offer. That's also another split test you can do. Just an organic image without the offer or with. But yeah, so here is kind of testing which image seems to be better. But again, yeah, you want to be split testing what you think is the winning feature based on previous learnings. So here in this build here, if you had ran these 3 ads first, then I wouldn't run this ad again here, because this ad is exactly like it's identical to this. So if you already have previous data of the exact same image, you don't need to run it again, because you can already compare the data from this ad and this ad with the original ad. I hope that makes sense. I just built it out this way, just so that you could kind of see the actual build. Okay, so yeah, so that's one creative kind of option to split test. Then you can also test different headlines, which is this here. So how people tend to view ads, according to a few different reports that I've read, is that the first thing that catches people's eyes in the ad and the feed is the creative. And then people tend to actually view the headline. So if you're running Facebook feed only, which is, the campaign we spoke about that you're going to set up with the placement as Facebook feed only, the headline is actually quite important. So first they view this, and then if they're interested, then they'll read the copy. I've read, of course, I can't guarantee that's 100% what everyone does, of course, but I've read quite a few reports that does mention this. So I think it's kind of a valid theory to keep in mind. So for the headline, you can test different versions of headline. And again, here to try to explain kind of split testing strategy, how I do things, is again, I try to test 3 vastly different things, different angles even. So for headline, I've included this here for you. You can, for example, test a headline that's more descriptive, describing the service or a unique offer, a discount, for example, or it can be more emotional based. I'm gonna put that there. So this one is a little bit more emotional based, but one thing that kind of stands out to me with this headline here is if people don't really read this or understand what's going on here, results is quite vague. They might not understand. It's not super descriptive of what the service is. So maybe if you added, for example, this, people that know about microblading, they'll straight away kind of within a split second understand, oh, this is cosmetic tattooing, this is microblading. So that could be something to consider to kind of make the headline quite kind of obvious in terms of what you're trying to communicate. But yeah, to describe here, offer, emotional, for example, these could be 3 headlines that you could test 3 different strategies. And then again, you see which one does better of your 3 ads. And then you can narrow down on that. So say that we have, this is more of a service-based, descriptive, quite dry, very, easy to understand location and what the actual service is. You could split test that with a second ad that's more an offer. So try to emphasize there the discount, for example, that. And the third one can be more emotional. For example, wish you had better brows, need microblading. And then whichever one is the winner here, say that the emotional one is the winner, so you notice kind of a significant lower cost per initiate checkout or a much higher click-through rate, then you can, the round 2 of split testing headlines could then be to do 3 different variations of emotional copy, headline copy. Yeah, so that's kind of how I go about it. And again, it's up to you to decide what's more important. Do you want to continue testing new images? Do you want to test new versions of headlines? Like, it's just an ongoing process. Other things that are worth testing. Here I wrote narrowing down on creative. For example, if it's a video, you can test 1-minute video. You can do the same video, but cut it so that it's shorter or even shorter than that. You can do a carousel ad with one. So when you click through, there's we call them cards, carousel cards. So you could do 3 cards or versus 5 cards versus 7 cards. You can test a still image with a colorful background or text overlay, or you can test that against an image that's very natural and organic looking. You can test ad copy versions. So this could be our long version. Then you could test a medium version, just shorten it. And then you can test a short version or super short version. Like that. And then see how that just changes what it looks like.
I found this on the web.
Oh, that's my Siri going off. Yeah, it just changes the entire look and feel of the ad. You can test ad copy and include a client testimonial here. Best tattoo artist ever. 5 stars. Obviously, it should be a real review and a bit more better word than that, but yeah, you get the idea. You can test ad copy with a lot of emojis versus no emojis at all. Now, these aren't probably, the emoji test is not something that it's a priority type of test. I would focus more so to nail the creative and the copy and the headline, and then you can kind of play around with emojis versus no emojis. You can also test different versions of ad copy. So, for example, ad copy that's more storytelling, such as, my name is Cerulean, and when I was a child, my mom wished that she had better brows. That's a terrible example again, but you get where I'm getting at. And one more fact-based, such as, this is what I do, this is what I've done, or ad copy that's more emotional. Do you wish that you would feel beautiful every single day and never worry about what your brows look like? That's kind of more emotional copy. And then you can also test different call to actions for any cold ads, any top of funnel traffic. I tend to do for service based. I tend to do learn more. So it's not really something that I would test too much if I was you. I think this one will work best for you, top of funnel. And then for your retargeting campaign, for your bottom of funnel, you'll notice that the call to action here instead is book now. And that's because anyone who's in your retargeting campaign, they're a bit warmer and they should be maybe prompted a little bit harder to actually make a booking and not just learn more, because they should already know about your services. Okay, yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. So yeah, troubleshooting ads is really just letting the ad run until it's had 1,500 to 2,000 impressions, or I've spent, $50 to $70 or so. Take a look at those metrics that I sent through in the email and then try to gauge which ad seems to be working the best in terms of click-through rate, in terms of cost per initiate checkout. And as I've mentioned previously, even those metrics in the email that I sent through, an ad might have a little bit of a lower click-through rate. This is a good example here. We can see this click-through rate here is 1.34. This one clearly has a better click-through rate, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the ad itself is better, because what we're looking for in the end of the day is results, right? Bookings. So if we notice that an ad has a lower click-through rate, but it's still actually generating a good or a better cost per initiate checkout, or like in this case, a good cost per lead, then I just kind of ignore the click-through rate. Because even though the click-through rate is higher, it could still mean that people are intrigued and drawn in, such as for this video. Video tends to have higher click-through rates, but then it doesn't mean that you're drawing in the right type of audience. So you could draw in more audiences or at a higher percentage, but then they're not actually booking any consultations. They're not making any bookings. So it's not the metrics. You shouldn't look at one isolating thing. You should look at the whole funnel as a whole and kind of try to gauge, overall for how the ad is doing and what is actually generating those bookings, which is the end goal and end final result that we're after. All right, I'm gonna try to round this up and finish this video. If you do have any questions on anything in this video that you want me to clarify, I know it's kind of a lot to go through in a short amount of time, just send me through an email and I'll be happy to explain further. All right, thanks Rebecca, bye-bye.